Alright, all set. And 3, 2, 1, action! This is Cinematic Motif. Hello, I'm Wanson, a film columnist and a content creator, and welcome back to Cinematic Motif, where I introduce you films in Taiwan and around the world. Have you ever been to Bhutan? Located on the eastern ridges of the Himalayas, Bhutan is the happiest country in the world, but also one of the latest countries to allow internet and TV. Bhutanese director Pawo Choyning Dorji's latest movie, The Monk and the Gun, or 不丹没有枪, discusses exactly the time when Bhutanese people just got into contact with TV, internet, and democracy. The Monk and the Gun was selected as the Bhutanese entry for the Best International Feature Film at the 96 Academy Awards, or Oscars, and was one of the 15 finalist films in the December shortlist. I was delighted to talk to director Pawo about his new film, which is released here in Taiwan on June 7th.
I was born in India. I grew up in Europe and Switzerland. I grew up in the Middle East, in Kuwait. I studied my college in the US, and then after that I got married to a Taiwanese, and then I ended up I currently live in Taipei with my wife and our 2 kids here.
Pawo received an Oscars nomination for the Best International Feature for his 2019 film Lunana, A Yak in a Classroom. I wonder how his life has changed after the nomination. Did he feel pressured?
So much, from all sides. Lunana was my first film, and even though it was my first film, I think for anyone who knows anything about the Oscars, people are aware that getting into the Oscars, even as a nominee, forget about winning, is almost like a crowning achievement to your career, right?
Yeah.
You work hard, you make films, and you are being recognized by the best of the best as one of the best. And when you achieve that with your first film, it's amazing, but it is also very scary. And I was very scared, and I kept telling my friends and family that if I achieve this with my first film, then I basically have the rest of my career to fall down from that level that people have placed me on with my first film, right?
Yeah.
But then also the thing is with being Bhutanese, I'm very, very proud in being Bhutanese, and I think that's quite evident in the films I create. But keeping that in mind, when you think of Bhutan, it is this, isolated Himalayan kingdom that not many people know of.
Yeah, most Taiwanese people or most people in the world have never traveled to Bhutan, and we don't know that much about the country.
And because Bhutan is so small, we don't have our own heroes, So, you don't see Bhutan winning Olympic medals or, it's just not there. And suddenly to have a Bhutanese be up there as one of the Oscar nominees, then the entire country looks at you and says, oh, he's the one who's going to, be a role model for us.
Yeah.
So when you have that, when you have a whole country look at you, it's a little bit pressuring, So for example, when I made the second film, like the first day when we met with the cast and crew, my first thing I said was, I don't want to hear anything about Oscars. This is an entirely different journey now.
Like people will be asking you, is it a film that is going to be at the Oscars?
Exactly.
The Monk and the Gun tells the story of an American, Ron, who travels into Bhutan in search of a valuable antique rifle. Ron crosses paths with a young monk, Tashi, who is instructed by his lama or master to make things right with a gun. The film explores Bhutan's movement towards democracy as the villagers trying to understand what elections are.
Not many people in Taiwan has ever been to Bhutan. Bhutan is one of the most, I think, isolated countries in the world. And it's interesting, you just look at the history of that region. We are what we call as Vajrayana Buddhists.
Oh.
It's a unique kind of Buddhist. And that culture, it's, very prominent in places like Tibet, Sikkim, all in the Himalayas.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, like, in the 1950s, due to different causes and conditions, Tibet, Sikkim, they ceased to exist, and Bhutan was left as the last remaining Vajrayana kingdom, trapped between a giant China and a giant India. So Bhutan basically went through this phase of self-isolation in order to preserve our sovereignty, our culture, our tradition, and we closed up. And the time when this story takes place is when the Bhutanese king decided, we need to open up. We need to join the rest of the world and come out of isolation, so that we are not left behind by the modern world. So during this time, yes, Bhutan became a democracy in order to keep up with the rest of the world, but also we were the last country in the world to allow television. We were the last country in the world to allow internet. So it was an interesting phase where, we shed away this idea of isolationism and embraced what modernization had to offer us. And when you do that overnight, there are interesting stories that take place. So The Monk and the Gun, if every aspect of it, the storyline, the characters, whatever's happening is actually drawn, it's inspired by real events that I lived through. Like, once, and for you,
democracy is something that already there. That is already there when I was born.
Not just that, even television.
Yeah,
I'm sure, like, when you look back, you can't say, oh, this was the moment when I first saw a television.
I have television all the time.
Yes, in Bhutan, the moment we turned on a television was equivalent to the Americans' moon landing. It was such a big national event that, like, they had this religious ceremony. The television set was draped in all the silk scarves, and then the VIP, I remember back then, I think it was one of the queen, she came and she turned on the TV, and then everyone started applauding. It's like, wow, we have a TV now. So I think it's when modernization comes all of a sudden to a country that is so cultural and traditional and spiritual, just like there's so many fun stories that take place. And you see this in The Monk and the Gun.
And people, if you're going to watch the movie, you're definitely going to see how TV has a great influence on election, not just election, the democracy, and in the daily lives of people. People even they all go to one person's house to watch the TV, which is really new and beautiful.
I mean, imagine this, TVs, because they arrived all of a sudden, they became a status symbol. And that's exactly what was happening in Bhutan.
Like, wealthy people have big and beautiful
people
TV.
were selling their cows, selling their yaks, selling their land in order to buy a TV box. And whichever house had the biggest TV, everyone would gather there. You know?
That's all about the movie, not just about democracy, but also the opening of Bhutan. What I'm also interested is, Pawo, as you just mentioned, you had your degree in the US, and it's about government, right? So how has this academic career, academic studying relates to your film? Because apparently this film has a lot of elements about election and how democracy works.
The interesting thing that you will see in this film is, yes, it is about modernization, but then also the thing is, I represent what modernization is through an American idea. You have the American gun collector, you have all these bits about America, gun rights, Second Amendment, all that. And the reason why I put that is, yes, because I grew up in the US, is because, yes, I studied government, or otherwise known as political science, in the US. And I put that because I think in the world there's this idea, and it's just not with the Bhutanese, it's with the rest of the world, even Taiwanese. In order to be modern, you have to be Western. There's this misconception. You can be modern while still holding on to your Eastern values, your Eastern traditions. But you look at all the countries that are considered modern, from Taiwan to, Japan to Korea. All these countries that are embracing modernization are embracing westernization.
Yeah.
And for me, that's why the US element is there, because when you think of westernization, the one country that comes to your mind is always the US.
Yes.
Exactly. And of course, growing up in the US, it was very interesting because I was studying political science at that time. And the interesting thing was, as I mentioned earlier, I also grew up in the Middle East. So I have a good cultural understanding of what it is to be in the Middle East, especially the Kuwait, Iraq, that area. I grew up like right after the Gulf War. So I have an understanding of the people's idea, the culture there.
And that is definitely maybe the contrary to what US people think, right?
Yes. And the interesting thing is, when I was doing my political science degree in the US, the Iraq War was going on. And I remember, being in class, and the Saddam Hussein statue had fallen down, and all my American classmates were like, yes, this is what we want to do. We want to go and liberate countries and give them the gift of democracy. And at the very same time, my own country was becoming a democracy. And, I could see that, the Bhutanese didn't want democracy. So being in the US, hearing this narrative about how, they think that everyone has to be liberated and everyone has to be given this gift of democracy and everyone will want this gift. And on the other side, being from a country where people were being gifted this democracy and no one wanted it. Yeah. I thought this was so interesting. And this story kind of like, was stuck in, some corner of my mind for all these years. And after I made Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom, and after it, became an Oscar nominee and had the success that it did, I felt this was the right movie, for the right next movie.
It's interesting to see how Pawo reflects the democratization of Bhutan in this film. However, I also want to discuss more about the characters in this movie. Do they reflect the Bhutanese people? I want to discuss this question with Pawo. In the film, there is this character, the mother, the mother in the film.
Yeah.
She's actually someone who says that she wants her family members, which are more important than elections and democracy. So, do you think this character reflects the values of Bhutanese people?
Oh, yes. Actually, I think from all the characters in the movie, she is one of the most interesting characters, and definitely one of my favorite characters that I created while writing the script. If you notice her, for most part of the movie, she doesn't say anything. She's just like
quiet,
observing,
working, and then doing the housework, and even going to the polling station and doing her work.
Yeah, exactly. It's only when it really matters that she speaks the words of wisdom. And I feel she is a really good representation of the traditional Bhutanese. Not just women, but just in general Bhutanese. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, Bhutanese are Vajrayana Buddhists. But then also, if you go around the world and you talk about Bhutan, the one word that always comes out is happiness. We are known as the happy country. And, she just wants to be happy, And that's what she tells the person who's trying to bring all this change, right?
Yeah.
What is the use of all this? And then that person says, oh, it's to make you happy. And then she says, this mother says, but we were always happy. And that is the core message of the film, I want to touch upon this time in Bhutan where the Bhutanese people and the country decided to become a modern country. And they basically were in this quest to achieve something that they did not have. And in that quest to try and achieve that, they ended up losing what they already had.
Yeah.
Whether, now whether Bhutan was happy or whether it's happy now, that's subjective, everyone will have different opinions. And even, me, if you ask me, it's you can't say it's not black and white, it changes from day to day. But that the quality of innocence, I think, is very important. If you see this movie, many people say this, I don't even have to say it. People watch this movie and they say, oh, this movie is about innocence. And it is.
Yeah.
Bhutanese are a culture that celebrates innocence, and I feel like when we modernized, all this change came in, suddenly innocence was taken as being ignorant. You know, there's a difference between being innocent and being ignorant.
As you've been talking about the changes that was brought to Bhutan, I noticed that it's also interesting that you use the symbolism of gun to represent this.
Yes.
So why is gun related to this modernization?
Well, you know, in storytelling, especially films, I think, and you know, I'm sure Wanson, you also, you know, are aware of it. The power of symbolism is so important.
Yeah.
And for me, when I created this story, I wanted something that was, you know, not made in Bhutan, of course, to symbolize the coming of modernization.
That's why the character said, "Is there a gun in Bhutan?"
Yeah. And even the title of the film, right? In Taiwan, it's Bhutan doesn't have guns.
Yes.
But yeah, I wanted the gun to symbolize the coming of modernization, the coming of westernization, because obviously the gun is not made in Bhutan. It is a Western item, right?
Yeah.
It is an item that is symbolized, that represents, you know, modernity. And just like with modernization, it can be beneficial, but it can also cause chaos if not used the right way. So I wanted that. And as you will see in the film, there's another symbol that comes up, which represents the
genitals.
Yes, you know, the big wooden phallus. And for me, I wanted to counter the gun with the phallus. The phallus represents Bhutanese culture, Bhutanese tradition, and it's a very good symbolism, because the moment you talk about a wooden penis, people feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
But then the thing is, traditionally, Bhutanese never felt uncomfortable about it, because it represents something much greater.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's so profound. When you see a penis, you feel uncomfortable. But then the Bhutanese thought is, oh, why do you feel uncomfortable?
You know, this is the traditional culture.
Yeah, you know, and to become enlightened, you have to let go of your concepts. So that represents that. But then when Bhutan did become a modern country, and as Bhutanese became more Western, suddenly we became embarrassed of being a culture that venerated wooden penises.
Yeah.
So, you know, symbolism is very, very important in the story. You know, you have the gun, the phallus, and West, modern, and tradition, culture coming together, clashing. So, yeah.
The Monk and the Gun is really a great reflection of Bhutan's modernization and democratization. There are very interesting politics and societal topics in this movie. However, I think a lot of viewers will be also interested about the other aspects of this film and other aspects of Bhutan, that is the cultural side of Bhutan that is reflected in this movie. For those people who have already watched the film, they'll definitely be fascinated by the beautiful scenery in Bhutan, especially toward the end of the film. We see a lot of flowers. It's really, really beautiful. So what was the filming location of this film, and how did you find this village, where it is?
Well, you know, the story takes place in one village. And Bhutan has many different kinds of villages, you know. There are these isolated, scattered villages, like Lunana. You know, Lunana was a very, very isolated village high up on the mountain. And for that narrative, that kind of village was needed. Remoteness was needed. But for this village, I wanted like a picturesque, clustered settlement, you know. And this village worked perfectly, because when you think of clustered settlements in Bhutan, Ura is one that comes up. And also Ura, the location of the story here, is a protected village for being the way it is. You know, it's
like a traditional protected village.
You know, it's all clustered settlement with fields everywhere. You know, everything you need is there. So after working on Lunana with the second film, I didn't want to be moving around everywhere, you know. I wanted to be there and in this clustered settlement get everything we needed. Stupa, you know, village homes, village fields, it worked like that. And also it's interesting that you talk about the beautiful scenery in the film.
Is it the everyday life of Bhutanese?
It is, you could say that.
Live in beautiful places.
But then also when you tell a Bhutanese story, the Bhutanese scenery, environment, landscape is a character within the story, you know.
Yeah.
It is it's a very, you can't tell without it.
Landscape is also a character in
Yes,
the story.
yes, yes,
It
yes,
helps
yes.
push the
Exactly.
narrative. Yeah.
And then the thing, my regret with Lunana, as beautiful as Lunana was up there, was that we couldn't get enough shots of Lunana, because we were challenged, you know. We were a solar powered film. We had one camera, we had no lights, we didn't have the equipment we needed, but with this we did. So you know, the cinematographer and all of us, we worked on ensuring that we really see the beautiful scenes of Bhutan. And of course the flowers at the end as well, those are buckwheat flowers. And from the time I wrote the script, I really wanted that, because, you know, once in this film, I don't want people to see this film and think it's a political film or anything. I dab around these political issues, but I want this film to give people hope. And again, going back to what symbolism is, right? I think blooming flowers, sea of buckwheat, pink flowers, it gives people hope, you know,
Right.
irrespective of culture and, you know, tradition or you know, political ideologies. Anything that's beautiful gives hope. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And also a very powerful ending for the film with these flowers and, you know, these sceneries to give people hope. And finally, I also want to ask you a really interesting question. This is a question that is not related to the whole every other questions on the list, but I'm really interested about this. In this film, people love the King of Bhutan so much.
Yeah.
Even during the voting, they vote for I think it was a yellow party, right?
Yeah.
Because yellow represents the king.
Yeah.
So why do Bhutanese people love their king so much?
You know, I think this is, I was having a conversation yesterday about this as well. And this is again, you know, Wanson, the thing with me is, as I said, I'm a citizen of the world. I studied in the West. I'm a product of the American education system. But at the same time, I feel like the path that I took to become who I am made me very traditional. You know, you know, with this conversation, I'm telling you that, you know, the mistake that we make is when we want to be modern, we want to be Western. I'm not, you know, that's the thing. That's the way I am. And I feel like in Eastern traditions, I think this belief and this willingness to believe in a fantasy is something so beautiful. You know, we human beings have that, and I'm a real sucker for that. I feel like believing in fantasy is just something needed.
Yeah.
And in Bhutan, one of the quintessential, you know, aspects of being Bhutanese is believing and having devotion to your king, and I think that is so beautiful.
Yeah, that is something in Bhutanese people's blood.
Yes. You know, when you go to Bhutan, you will see, you know, and that's again the point that I'm trying to put across with this film. The Western mind, every time there is a country and that is ruled by one person, it is like usually expected that, oh, these people are unhappy.
Yeah,
the
like
ruler is a dictator.
In Western world, they always become like a monarchy or something.
Exactly, dictator. You know, and Bhutan wasn't like that. You know, we were ruled by kings. You know, now we're in the fifth king, and all our kings have been very kind. You know, they work so hard to serve the people,
and people are happy.
You know, and I want to put that across. You know, that willingness to believe in a fantasy.
Yeah.
You know, it actually, I think, really impacts how people, you know, see things.
And that was my interview with Pawo Choyning Dorji, the director of The Monk and the Gun. Bhutan is really a country that is unique and special. They are so different from other parts of the world. For Bhutanese people, modernization and democracy made a huge impact on their life. There are benefits and downsides, but no matter what, Bhutanese people want to be happy. Perhaps there are something that they think are more important than modernization. If you want to find out the answer, don't miss your chance to watch The Monk and the Gun or 不丹没有枪. It is in cinemas in Taiwan right now. And this has been Cinematic Motif, produced by me, Wanson, for Radio Taiwan International. As always, if you've got any feedback, please send your email to wanson@rti.org.tw. You can also follow me on my Instagram and YouTube. My handle is @wansonscafe. And I'll see you next week. Bye bye.